Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals and business owners get their books done and published to educate their consumers, to grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. We're doing a series of spotlights on remarkable advisors across the country. And on this segment, joining me is Abby Santiago. She's one of the founders of Florida Wealth Planning Group. Abby, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here.
Abby, tell us a little bit about Florida Wealth Planning Group, and specifically, who are the types of folks that you like to help?
Florida Wealth Planning Group was established in 2007. My partner and I went from being individual advisors to creating a joint practice. We now are 20 advisors in 9 locations throughout Florida. And it's quite exciting to see that we are uniting with advisors who maybe got pushed out from some of the bigger outfits because they aren't producing large numbers and they really have client-centric focus as their primary as opposed to producing higher numbers. So those are the advisors that join us. The clients that we work with, they range from young professionals to entrepreneurs. And then, of course, we live here in Florida, and Florida's full of retirees. So we do have an awful lot of families that we help with their retirement income, tax planning, and estate planning.
That's terrific. And as we do this interview now, we're coming out of this crazy pandemic. And of course, we're not totally out of the woods yet. But can you give us a peek at what the pandemic has done to folks' wealth, their financial planning, for example, and what did it really shine a spotlight on the need for during this pandemic?
You know, it's really interesting because no one could have predicted this pandemic. And then certainly no one could have predicted that the dip of 37% we saw in March of 2020 would recover as quickly as it has. We had a record year in 2020. And thus far, what do we have? 30 something days, 40 days left of the year. And, you know, it's been a strong year. I think what we've discovered is a couple things. One is we were really prepared to do virtual meetings. And so we are still doing virtual meetings, which means that we now can work with clients in the United States. That has freed up a lot of time because we're not traveling to the different cities that we work in. The other thing that I think from a client-centric point of view, it really helped our clients to start evaluating what really are their values, where do they want to spend their time, energy, and resources. You know, we take family for granted, we take our relationships for granted, and this pandemic has really helped us come back and look at what's valuable for me, where do I want to spend my time. And it's interesting because we've done some longevity seminars, Mark. Above genetics, above exercise, above diet, we actually know scientifically that your social interactions are the greatest predictor of longevity and good health. And I think it's really been present for all of us to see that in this pandemic.
And that's really should be an alarm signal for folks with this social media thing that they got to get out there and connect with real people on a social level. But I'm glad you mentioned that. And Abby, you also mentioned an important term. To your point, values. We know that the pandemic caused a lot of self-reflection time and people really deciding on what's important. Now, one of the biggest fears people have, I think, with financial planning is getting financially naked to talk about it. Did the pandemic change people's values about getting their financial house in order?
You know, I think just because when you have nothing else to do, you sort of start cleaning your own house. And I think finances is probably the #1 thing that causes most people stress. So if you can get your finances back in control, or at least create a plan that will get you back in control, you will naturally start to see the stress level drop. And so just like people went to Home Depot and fixed that leaky toilet and that sink that has been dripping for years and they just never got around to it. We have seen a tremendous amount of families kind of coming back, looking at, okay, here's where I am. What do I need to do differently? And how am I on pace if I don't make any changes? The other really surprising thing for me, Mark, I teach a class on Wednesday nights to young students, and they actually reached out to me, recent college graduates, to learn financial literacy, not just all the hype about Bitcoin and day trading, but really understanding tax codes, understanding what type of accounts they should open, whether it should be a Roth or an after-tax 401k, how much should they put in their pre-tax 401k, should they have a traditional or a Roth IRA. Really very interesting conversations for 22, 23-year-olds, because I know at that age, I certainly wasn't thinking about finances.
Speaking of that age group, that brings up a question that I hear all the time. When's the right time to start financial planning? Some people might think, hey, I don't even have any money yet to count. So what's the point of planning anything?
Great question. I always say there's a formula. It's time and money. If you don't have a lot of one, you'll need a lot of the other. So the sooner you start, the better. I literally love talking to 17, 18, and 19-year-olds because saving is a habit, just like studying is a habit, just like exercising is a habit. The number one mistake I see, Mark, is that people wait until they have a big chunk of money to then start investing. The smartest and most successful way to really create wealth is to start saving at whatever level you can. Doesn't matter if it's $10 a week or $10 a month. And then you just continue to up the ante whenever you're not feeling like I'm not drowning, I can raise the dollar amount a little bit. And you really will build really good habits. I will tell you that my clients that are in their 80s now, they have had the habit of saving. And even in their 80s, if they don't save, they have like something's wrong. It's just in their ingrained genetics. It's their, part of who they are to save more than you spend or living below your means. I guess that's really the way I would phrase it.
That's like developing another positive habit. It's like in fitness or nutrition, when you start doing, good habits, it becomes part of you and it becomes habitual. You're addicted to doing the good habit. That's sage advice. So Abby, you mentioned that big mistake. Are there any like big glaring misconceptions or myths out there about financial planning that you hear that might be keeping people from getting started or from success?
I do think a lot of people think it's expensive. And, Florida Wealth Planning Group, Ameriprise as a whole, we have a foundational plan that we start with. There's no charge. It's a great way to start the process. And as the person elevates and gets more complicated, your advisor will talk to you about the different ways to work with on a fee-based, a commission-based, or some combination, okay? It's only expensive if you take action and it turns out to not be the right action that would have helped you get to where it is you want to go.
Abby, what inspired you to get into financial planning and helping folks in this area? How'd you get started?
Oh, good story. I grew up Latina with a grandmother in my home, and she preached save for a rainy day, a penny saved is a dollar earned, all that stuff, because she was born in the early 20s, 1920s. And I, as a young person, of course, did what every young person does. It went in one ear and out the other. And I happened to be running a chain of restaurants out in California very successfully, lived in Malibu, overlooked the Pacific Ocean, drove a sports car, and had not one penny saved. I did a smart thing. I invested in a piece of real estate, intended to have a tenant in Culver City. And back then, there weren't rules if an eviction had started that you had to let the new owner know. So I closed on the property, and the next day I got the court notice saying I had to let her live there for 6 months for free or pay her $5,000 to move out. And then I happened to go to work and I got laid off. So all of a sudden I realized, holy moly, everything grandma told me was correct. And because I experienced that, well, I'm not prepared, I didn't do this the way I was trained to do this. I actually revisited, where do I want to go from here? I was a math major. I loved math. And because of the industry in the restaurant industry, I knew that I really enjoyed people. What could I do to combine these two? And the state of California had financed a program for recently laid off individuals, which I qualified for, to train as a stockbroker sales assistant. And I got my first job at Lehman Brothers, and that's how I got my foot in the door.
Oh my. So there's truth to people learn more from their misfortunes actually than the successes. And hopefully working with someone like you can help people avoid some of those mishaps.
Yeah, I think the key in working with an advisor is that you pick someone you can relate to. Because I say this to my business partner, if people will talk to you about their money, they will talk to you about anything, really. You'll hear stuff they won't tell their best friend. So pick someone you feel comfortable with. That's the number one component, I think, with a successful advisor relationship.
That's terrific. Abby, for folks listening today on this program, if they wanted to connect with you and learn more, how can they find you?
Well, they can find me on my website, Abigail. Well, actually go to ameriprise.com/Florida Wealth Planning Group. And that's our website. They can reach out via telephone 386-597-2994, or they can email me abigail.x.santiago@AMPF, Ameriprise Financial. That's what that stands for.com.
Abby, this has been terrific. Lots of great information. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for doing what you do. It makes a difference.
Abby Santiago, co-founder of Florida Wealth Planning Group. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published to educate their consumers, to grow their practices, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.